session today I want to talk about is stewardship, or how to enjoy God's provision and respect it. We're staying in a neighborhood here in wherever I am, Newcastle, and it's kind of an old neighborhood, and I've been going out for walks, and it has all these very unusual looking houses. They're all quite close together, and it's an old neighborhood. And as I'm walking, I see some houses, which are old houses, but it's painted nicely. The yards are well kept. Right next door to that is a house that's not kept very well. Around the corner is a house that could have been a nice looking house. I don't know how much furniture they have in the house, but they have furniture outside of the house. And I was walking along and I'm thinking about these people living in this house. It's the kind of head I have. I'm always watching people and thinking about it. And I think now, maybe this one, the reason they don't care about it is it's a rental. Maybe they inherited it and it doesn't mean anything to them. Maybe they never worked to own this and so they don't have any sense. And maybe this cute little house is some young couple that's working and scraping, and this is their investment, and they're so happy for it, and they're really anxious to keep it nice. And I was thinking about this house where all the furniture's outside and how awful it looked. And they not only didn't have any regard for their own house, they didn't have any regard for the neighborhood whatsoever. Everybody that drives by, that's an eyesore. I looked at it and I thought, how really truly inconsiderate. But it has to do with an attitude about their house. Our culture and customs make us feel differently sometimes about possessions. And so you'll see one particular culture is very much more particular, maybe more neat and tidy, but there's people within that culture that are not. And you see other cultures that are maybe a little bit more laid back. I remember when I was going door to door in Dominican Republic, talking to people about the Lord, in a very, very poor place. Lots of places it was just dirt on the floors. But I went into some little tiny huts that the dirt on the floor was clean, that there was little flowers there, somebody put up curtains, somebody cut out a calendar picture and put it on the wall. Now, what was the difference? An attitude. It was a difference of an attitude about possessions. I am really blessed. I represent to you, in our particular family, the 6th generation of people that have followed God. My children are the 7th. And so there's many things that I've never had to work at, because I have the blessing of the generation before me that has been passed on to me. For some of you, you say, well, sure not true in my family. Well, listen, honey, it has to start somewhere. So you start it, and you're going to have the next generation's going to be different. You're going to get this thing all turned around. But my dad was a pastor, and I grew up in the basement of a church. We had a little apartment that looked out on the alley. It wasn't much, but that's what we had. Lauren grew up one time living in a tent with boxes for furniture. His family lived in their car. They lived in a well house once. Neither one of us grew up with a whole lot of possession kinds of things. But do you know what? We never grew up feeling poor. We were really rich. We lived like this because this was necessary for what the call of God was on our lives. We weren't poor people at all. We were identifying with the need where we were. It didn't matter. Our families never said, it's too bad, we can't do this because we're involved with the gospel work. That's why we don't have this or that. We both grew up with this incredible sense of the remarkable privilege that it is to serve God. And that was an attitude that was passed down to me. And it never occurred to me that any other lifestyle could have ever been so wonderful. because that's the way my folks felt about it, and that's what they passed on to me. I also grew up with a tremendous respect for the provisions that God had provided. You know how in the churches you have the little envelopes where you put the money, or the church bulletins, or that kind of thing? As a little kid, I was never allowed to make notes on the church envelopes because that wasn't my personal property. That belonged to the church. And it cost money to make that. And therefore, that was not mine. That belonged to the church. And my father had such a strict standard. I don't mean to bondage, but it was never hard to understand what belonged to the church. We lived in the church. I learned to roller skate in the basement of the church and played church lots in the church. It was a great big building, big as this is. But we lived in the basement. And so I had the whole church. But I couldn't touch things in the church or do anything that would hurt any of the property of the church because that belonged to the church. And my folks explained it to me really well as a little kid. When we said something belonged to the church, it wasn't this nebulous building that it belonged to. They would explain to me, you know, Grandma Peffley, the lady that's so nice to you always, she doesn't have very much money. But do you know that she always puts a couple of dollars in the offering? And Grandma Peffley's money is what helped give us the money to print these envelopes. So I didn't see those envelopes that just belonged to the corporate. That was an investment that Grandma Peffley had made. And I love Grandma Peffley. And I knew she'd sacrificed. And so it gave me a real respect for the things that God had given us. They weren't inanimate objects to me. Are you with me? They were something that God had provided for us. Some time ago, about a year ago right now, a year and a few months, Lorna and I took on a project for the University of the Nations in Tonga. Those of you that are from YWAM here, Australia, will know that you helped us a great deal with that project. The word of the Lord had come to us some years before that we were to build a campus at the University of the Nations in Tonga. And friends, it just wasn't happening. And God began to speak to us that we needed to put our shoulder to the plow on this. Well, it was a giant effort. I did some fundraising for this and thought I had a done deal. That's what they told me. There was a grant for schools in third world, and we fit the whole bill. I was so excited, worked so hard on my proposals, and kept going back and forth to them. And it's because the time's going on, and we have a wonderful piece of property, but we have nothing on it, or very little. Time's going to be coming. We got a couple hundred people coming in. Where are we going to put them? So I'm really moving on this proposal, but they did tell me, you've got your case number. It is a done deal. A relaxation. Now I just got to get that money and go with it. Here it is, just really about 2 or 3 months before the project, and everybody, leadership training school is starting there, school of intercession is coming there. We figure we have about 250 people coming in. And the whole deal falls through. And we were here in Australia at that particular time when all of it fell through, particularly the base in Melbourne. People got a hold of the vision. The Polynesians with Island Breeze got hold. Not only did they give themselves, but they gave finances that they had put aside for their own facilities and went there physically and did it and began to build. Others here in Australia went to different businesses and all, began to get a lot of equipment for us, mattresses, PVC pipe, toilets, showers, and then sent a plumber over, and God began to provide for us. But when the students were still coming in, we still didn't have it all. And I was working a lot on the procurement of this. Everybody worked, guys. Students would get up at 5:30 in the morning, go out and work, and come back for class at 9 o'clock. And then we would all work to the evenings. Some of you saw the pictures yesterday. So it's just wonderful. So excited about what God was doing. And then God gave us the day that we were going to be able to go into the property. So we went into the property. And we were in these buildings, these little follies. We had a couple of tents to meet in. And I had it in my heart to have this be a completed campus, that we would have tables and chairs for people. And it just really grieved my heart that when we came and we were starting to get there, we didn't even have tables for people to eat around or chairs for them to sit on. And all that kind of thing is really important to me. That, to me, is part of honoring you. And so I called every friend that I had, and I pulled things together, and we ended up having some tables made and chairs, and we had made some special deals. We even had matching china, and that's absolutely remarkable, and all the silverware, and we had all this wonderful stuff. And it's a sweet campus. I mean, it really looks good. All these little follies, and we got the flags that go up. Well, we had it. As we moved in and we were having all this equipment, I noticed that people weren't taking care of anything. The chairs that were left out, and the tables were left out, and it rained. And as I walked by and I saw this table left out in the rain, I had this great grief in my heart. I wasn't mad at the YWAMers. I knew they didn't see it. But what I thought about was what that table represented to me. That table, the finances of it, were purchased by one of our DTS schools in Hawaii. They had taken up offerings and then taken up money, and to get enough money to send to me to have the tables. There'd been another carpenter that had helped give his time. A guy from Africa had gone all over Tonga trying to get the right carpenter to do it, and he'd done that. The legs of those tables we had carried in our suitcases from New Zealand. I'd found the legs in there. Those tables represented to me so much effort of so many saints. But to other people, it was just a table. And I found that morning as I was talking to the students, I said, I know we all feel differently about how we take care of things. But I want you, no, I'm not mad at anybody, but my heart's really grieved. Because to you, it was just a table. And to me, it was a sacrifice of the saints. And there is a feeling, friends, that when we come into a corporate thing, that it doesn't belong to anybody. Now, what does this mission owe you? But YWAM ought to do this for us. Who is YWAM? There is no big corporate group that's gaining up finances for all of us. It's the individual members of a congregation, of the mission. That is the church. That is the mission. It's all of us together. So this table I've described to you belongs to all of us. Right? And it's the gift of God that's in us. Luke 16, verse 10. He who is faithful in very little thing is also faithful in much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. If therefore you have not been faithful with mammon, which is unrighteous, who will entrust the true riches to you? And this is the phrase that's been going over in my mind since early this morning. And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? If you have not been faithful with the corporate, with that which has been given to us as a group, then will God be faithful to give you something for your very own? Interesting thought, eh? One of the things that's new to people coming into a corporate scene is what belongs to the community and what belongs to me. Now, I've just described to you the table, that it belongs to the saints. But it belongs to all of us. But I don't have the right to bring that table into my room and have it just serve me. Because it was given by the kids, the DTS students, not for Lauren and Dar, but it was given for the campus in Tonga. But you say, Dar, you and Lauren are the leader, and that's the only table around. You probably need a table. Yeah, we need a table, but we don't need that table. That table belongs to the group. It was given to the group. But you said, I'm part of the fellowship. I need to be able to use this too. After all, we have all these chairs in the lecture room. And shouldn't YWAM provide for us chairs for in our room as well as the lecture room? Well, that would be nice. But why don't you stir your own faith up for your own chairs? Somebody else stirred up their faith so that we'd all have chairs. And there is a sense, friend, that we do belong to this fellowship. But as you bring children into a corporate setting, treat the furnishings the way you need to treat them, in the same way as you would your own. And maybe you're not faithful about taking care of your own things, and take a new look at that. But the scripture just so impacted me this morning. I had never seen it like that. I knew about the much and the little. And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? And the Bible talks about taking care of it in the field, taking care of the outside, taking care of others before you take care of yourselves. And I'm here to tell you, after this 100 years in the mission, that you can't outgive God. You just can't outgive God. And I am not owed anything by this mission, friends. This mission doesn't owe me anything. I'm here to be a contributor. It is an agency for me to serve in, but it doesn't owe me anything. And if you get the attitude that this mission, your fellowship, owes you all kinds of stuff, you're missing it. This is an opportunity for blessing for all of us to give into. We talk about, well, YWAM ought to do this, or YWAM ought to do that, or YWAM made this decision. I said, now, the organization didn't make that decision. An individual made the decision. Let's talk about that individual and what their decision was. I'll give you our own personal testimony. And I want to bring in a lot of aspects here for those of you that are considering or already in the mission. I'm sure it's harder for people that have had their own separate housing and have lived, quote, a normal life, than for people like me that just grew up in the basement of the church and moved into YWAM and have lived in one room or three rooms almost my whole married life. So I'm sure there's adjustments there that I don't understand. But when you have put aside let's say you've sold your house and your car, and you've said, this is the way I'm going to walk. I want to come in, I want to do this. Nobody forced you to. Nobody said you had to sell your house or your car. You freely did that in order to serve Jesus. And we will share with you whatever God has corporately provided for you, for us. If you want to believe God for more, if this isn't an adequate space for you, you have the freedom to live somewhere else, to pray in whatever you need for yourself. That's fine. But we will give you what we have. And as you walk around I remember when we moved into the old dilapidated hotel in Hawaii that we just thought was the most wonderful thing that ever had happened. We've been waiting all those years to get in. People had one room to live in or two rooms, and we had three. We had more space than anybody else. One more room. And I remember saying to the kids, because it bothered me that we had more than the others. And I didn't want our children people saying, oh, you've got more room than we do because your dad's the leader. The leader gets more. The head of the corporation gets more. Isn't that the way it usually works? There are a lot of perks, etc. I said to the kids, now we have one more room than everybody else. And the reason we have it is we have to serve so many more people. There's nobody else in the community that has to have so much company as we have. There's nobody else that has to have more meetings than we have. And so that's the reason why we have extra space. It isn't because we're better than anybody else. We just have more people to serve. We have lived in all kinds of facilities. We lived in a little tiny, almost hut. Well, it was 7 feet by 9 feet. It was a cabin. Kids called it the cabinettes. We had 2 bunks, one bunk here, another bunk here, and had enough room, to hang our clothes on the ends, and you had to go outside to change your mind. I mean, there was hardly any space. But we fixed it up. It was Christmas time. I decorated the door and put up my little tiny Christmas tree. Our kids, if you talk to them today about when we lived in the cabinettes, they would really tell you it was a great time. We had a really good time living there. We have lived behind gymnasiums, and we've lived in tents and huts and all kinds of areas. And wherever you live, that's the place God's got for you right then, and you enjoy it, and you make the best of it. My husband said to me the other day, after we had been in Tonga, and I'd had so much fun fixing up my hut. He said, Dar, you don't like to keep house, you just like to play house. And I said, yeah, I think that's right. But it was interesting when our children went on outreach. Our son David, because he'd hardly ever been in the USA, wanted to do his outreach. He did his DTS in Amsterdam, and he wanted to do his outreach in America, in North America. And so they lived in the projects in New Orleans, which is a very underprivileged housing, really a very bad neighborhood. Around the corner they saw people get shot and all the rest of it. And so YWAMers moved into this dilapidated old building. And the school leader said, David walked in there, walked around, began to look at it, and he says, well, guys, how do we want to live? We're going to be here for 3 months. Let's decide how we're going to fix this place up. And he said they would soon begin to mark it off and say, okay, this will be your area, and this will be mine. And hey, it'd be nice if we could watch the news, and let's see if we can find us a television somewhere. And they said they'd never lived so good on outreach. And the challenge was because that's the way he'd been raised. That whatever you have, you make the best of it at the time because that's what God's got for you right now. And it's fine. It's okay. And they've never known anything different, and they've never felt deprived. When we finally moved into the hotel, and we had this property that God had promised us, who we'd prayed for and believed for in a period of 18 months. Period of 18 months. we moved probably every 2 months. We just moved all of the time. And I remember one time we were staying in this condo. And we had a real estate friend who had given us the opportunity to stay in condos when the people weren't there that owned them. She'd contact them and say, can these people live here for that season of time? And we'd just, sometimes it was for free, sometimes it was minimal rent. But we were living all over the place. Well, the landlord came up and said, by the way, the people are returning to this condo tomorrow. And there was no place for us to go to live. Lauren was gone, it was the kids and me. I mean, we just had no other place. And a single mom by the name of Jan Jones, who I was real close with, had 3 kids. She and her 3 kids are living all in one room. Well, she's the only person I feel that free to do. So I called Jan. I said, Jan, can my kids sleep with your kids and I'll sleep with you? I said, I know how little that room is, but we don't have any place to go. So I said to the kids, hey, we're going to have slumber party for a little while. We're going over and staying. Oh, they're really excited. So we get all this stuff into the van. I've packed up the stuff that we have. I just get the key in the trunk to close up the van, and the landlord comes running out. He says, Darlene, I'm really sorry. I've made a terrible mistake. They're not coming back to your condo. It's another one. So I start taking the stuff back out. I said, well, kids, we get to stay here a little longer. Aren't we going to go and stay all night with Jan? So I called Jan. I said, Jan, we've had a change. Oh, she said, Dar, don't do it. She said, move back to your house another day. But she says, my kids are going to be so disappointed if you guys don't come sleep with us tonight. So we spent the weekend with them in order to fulfill the kids' wishes. Our children, we're not all uptight. We don't have any place to go. Well, we've got another grand adventure. The reason both Lauren and I have the attitude of the grand adventure, the wonder of God's provision, is because our own parents passed that on to us. And though we had not very much, we had this great feeling that we were children that belonged to a family that had a destiny. We did what we did because it was going to make a difference in people's lives. And so as you come in to a new kind of living, respect those things that God has given. Recognize, and so when your children tear something up, that isn't just some inanimate object. That's the sacrifice of lots of people, right there. That's the sacrifice of lots of people. I can remember we had a terrible time with the kids breaking sprinklers. And because they'd be out playing and they wouldn't pay any attention to them. And I tried to explain about the people that come here to work. Not only do we think about the resources of the finances that have been given to us, but the people that work here. They've come here and are giving their services to help with the landscaping because God's called them to make this a beautiful place for all of us. And we treat it with respect. And that you don't just suck out of your thumb, you know. It's got to be taught. It's got to be taught. And it has to be an attitude that you have. How do we consider these things? How do we look at them? Well, we can just take this from YWAM. It doesn't belong to anybody. Yes, it does belong to somebody. It belongs to the corporate. And it's not to be used for you individually when it belongs to the total. I can tell you guys in all honesty, I have never taken an egg from the kitchen and just walked down into the kitchen and taken an egg for some company that we had coming in. Because that's not my egg to take. Now, I can go find the people that are in charge of the kitchen and explain, we've got extra guests coming, can I have an egg? And they would say, sure. But those eggs are maybe counted for the total. And Lauren is the president of the university. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't belong to us personally. It belongs to the corporate. And there is a very definite difference. And you don't take something for you personally that belongs to the whole. Now, what we do, we share everything that we have as carefully as we can so that we all get the most amount of blessing. But I can have an empty house without a stick of furniture in it. And somebody comes up with a truckload of furniture and says, this is for the mission. I don't have the right to say, well, praise God, he's provided. Because it's for the whole. So that'll have to go into the lounge and I will still have the empty house. Because it was for the group as a whole. Thing that was on my heart just to share briefly.